First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Psalms, the 78th chapter. God's guidance of his people in spite of their unfaithfulness. So as it says here, Maskil of Asaph. And let me pull up the parallel here. Cool. So in other words, a psalm of Asaph, which Asaph was a, you could say like a psalmist, right? But also a seer. So when you look at a lot of the psalms of Asaph, that's why you'll see that a good amount of them are prophetic, and they're deep, right? They hit different points in there, because he had that spirit on him. So it says here, give ear, O my people, to my law. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old, which this is also, this is also prophetic because it was also symbolic of Yahweh Shai, and he fulfilled this. Let's go real quick to the book of Matthew, chapter 13, and we'll start at verse 34. It says, all these things spake Yahweh Shai, red letter, unto the multitude in parables, and without a parable spake he not unto them, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables, I will utter things which have been kept secret from the foundation of the world. See, going back to what we read here in Psalms 78, and there's another psalm that's, I think it's 49. If I cross-reference this, let's see if it comes up. Yeah, Psalms 49. I will incline mine ear to a parable. I will open my dark saying upon the harp. And also, as you read the Psalms, there are a lot of, quite a few, of Psalms that are prophetic, right, and really were fulfilled in Yahweh Shai and the things that he did. And when you read it in line with when it actually transpired in the New Testament, you'd see that Yahweh Shai meant it quite literally when he said he came to fulfill all the things that were written of him, right? Even when we get to, I believe it's Psalm 22, and it talks about how they gave him vinegar or gall. He literally in the I think it was in John, right? Or I believe it was in John, but it said that one of the last things he had to do, which he did in order to fulfill that prophecy, was while he was on the cross, he said, I thirst. To cause that, because if he never said that, why would they bring that to him? See, so he said, I thirst, to cause them to bring that to him. And when they brought it to him, he drank a little. I think it said that, and then afterwards, he said, it is finished. Okay, but we'll get to that when we get to Psalms 22. But just interesting that all the things he did was keeping in mind the things that were written of him to fulfill them. And a dark saying is, like we read a parable, it's not clear. And it needs to be broken down. Verse 3, which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us, right? Stories we have heard and known, stories our ancestors handed down to us. We will not hide from them from their children, shewing to the generation to come the praises of the Lord. Right, and that's basically, passing down the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, the accounts, the majesty and the things that the Lord has done down to our children. So it keeps it alive in the future generations, and his strength and his wondrous works that he have done. For he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children, right? And that's the laws and the commandments that he gave us that were to be taught not only to us, but our children, that the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children. See, so it was taught to us that we would teach to our children, so that they would learn it, and then they would teach it to their children. That they might set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments. So this would keep, the knowledge of the things the Lord had done and his commandments alive, that we would have our hope in him by continuing to follow his ways and keep his commandments and not forget the works of God, and might not be as their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that set not their heart aright, and whose spirit was not steadfast with God. Going back to the wilderness. Because why do you think the Lord destroyed that generation in the wilderness, saving Joshua and Caleb? Because they had that stubborn and rebellious heart. The children of Ephraim, being armed and carrying bows, turned back in the day of battle, because the Lord was not with them. They kept not the covenant of God and refused to walk in his law. You see that? And as a result, the Lord gave us up, to our enemies. So that's why, as it says, the carrying your bow and your weapon going into war, we return back. Verse 11, they forgot his works and his wonders that he had shewed them. Marvelous things did he in the sight of their fathers in the land of Egypt, in the field of Zoan. And Zoan is a place in Egypt. Okay, and this is going into the plagues that the Lord struck Egypt with on our behalf. He divided the sea, which is the Red Sea, and caused them to pass through. He made the waters to stand as an heap. That's in the book of Exodus. In the daytime, also he led them with a cloud, which is a chariot that the Lord was leading Israel with in the wilderness, and all the night with a light of fire, because that's what it was, right? It gave them light in the night, and it was a cloud in the day. He clave the rocks in the wilderness and gave them drink as out of the great depths, right? That's in I believe it's in the book of Numbers, but it's in the Torah, right? When the Lord commanded Moses to give them water to drink out of a rock. He brought streams also out of the rock, which is water, and caused waters to run down like rivers. So they had enough water to drink. And they sinned yet more against him by provoking the Most High in the wilderness. So after all these things he did for us, Israel still provoked him. And they tempted God in their heart by asking meat for their lust, right? Go dealing with the quail. And it's going to explain why it is that was a temptation to the Lord. Right? I mean, it triggered him. You could say in modern sense, or in modern language, you say they triggered him. Yea, they spake against God. They said, can God furnish a table in the wilderness? NLT says, they even spoke against God himself, saying, God can't give us food in the wilderness. This was their murmuring and their backbitings against the Lord. And this is, keep in mind, this is after he had Moses part the Red Sea, had them cross, gave them water out of a rock, fed them manna from heaven. And this is what they're saying. Behold, he smote the rock, and the waters gushed out, and the streams overflowed. Can he give bread also? Can he provide flesh for his people? That's the mind. Oh, okay. I mean, yeah. He gave us water out of a rock. Yeah, I get that. But like, can he also give us like bread, or meat? Bruh. So verse 21, it says, therefore the Lord heard this and was wroth. So fire was kindled against Jacob, and anger also came up against Israel. And he destroyed Israelites in the wilderness because of this. Because they believed not in God and trusted not in his salvation. See, they were making complaints. They were, every 2 seconds, oh, it were better that we were in Egypt. Did God bring us here to kill us? Why would he go through all of that, bring the plagues upon Egypt, bring you out of there just to kill you in the wilderness? So they didn't trust in his salvation. They didn't trust in the plan that the Lord had for them to deliver them to the promised land. Though he had commanded the clouds from above and opened the doors of heaven and rained down manna upon them to eat, and had given them of the corn of heaven. See, even though he had performed that miracle, sustained them up until this point, Man did eat angels' food. He sent them meat to the full. And this was angels' food, not because angels eat, but because it was made in the heavens. Okay? The angels prepared it, you could say. It says he sent them meat to the full. Verse 26, he caused an east wind to blow in the heavens. So not only did he feed them manna, right, and gave them water to drink, he also gave them meat. He caused an east wind to blow in the heaven, and by his power he brought in the south wind. He rained flesh also upon them as dust, and this is talking about the quail, and feathered fowls like as the sand of the sea. So there were a lot. And he let it fall in the midst of their camp, round about their habitations. So he basically drove, basically blew through the wind all the quail over there and gave them right around them so they could catch it and they can, easily have access to it. So they did eat. And let's actually look up here. Quail. Bird. See, that's what that looks like. Okay. And it just wasn't enough for Jake. So it says here, so they did eat and were filled, for he gave them their own desire. They were not estranged from their lust. So they were not satisfied, right? They weren't even ashamed to give in to their lust and vocalize that on top of it. But while their meat was yet in their mouths, the wrath of God came upon them, and slew the fattest of them, and smote down the chosen men of Israel. Now, I'm going to give you an example. I'm not going to play any videos of it, but you see this guy who does this shark bite dude? I'm pretty sure we have all seen this guy at one point or time, okay, doing dumb, stupid things online. This guy right here. This guy. Let me get a picture of his face. Yeah, there you go. You see this guy right here? Pretty much everybody hates him because all he does is he goes into restaurants, you have them turn the camera on and just eats a ridiculous amount of food in an annoying, extremely annoying fashion. Okay? Obnoxiously loud, yelling shark bite before opening his wide gape and his flaring nostrils to bite into that, with his back widening ever so widely with every bite that he takes. So you see a guy like this, even people today in this society get mad and hate just the way that the shit that he does when it comes to food. How much more and he's an Israelite. So imagine him in the wilderness, on some and you if you don't know who he is, you might think, oh, why are you just hating on some random dude? Go and look up some of those videos. Okay, go and look up some of those videos with those egregious dances that he does. You'll understand why. So if people today can get pissed off by just watching videos of this guy, how do you think the Lord felt when Israel were showing blatant lack of appreciation, disrespect, backbiting, and murmurings against the Lord? And then just the sight of them eating that lust, basically lusting after that quail, and completely, missing the point that the Lord wanted to show them. Not even in humility. Sometimes you do something and then somebody's like, all right, whatever, and they finally give it to you, and you feel ashamed, right? You should at least, like, damn, now I feel kind of like bad. Like, I don't even know if I have an appetite for this, because it's kind of like, just the way you went about it, it just doesn't, it doesn't even feel right. Not these people. No, not them. It's like, let me give you an example. It's like somebody owes you money, right? And you don't need the money right away, but then you see them, or whoever the lender sees the borrower, and the borrower may have the money, but it's not like that's all they have, and they need it to like buy food or pay for an expensive bill, and they're like, look, I got you tomorrow, where I'll get paid and I'll be able to give you the money because today I have to use it for this or rent. And the lender, who doesn't need the money, completely heckles the borrower for the money. That he's no, I want it today. I want that money right there in your pocket. Give me that right now. And they press them and press them and press them. And then eventually, all right, fine. They give it to them, right? A normal person with, a right mind would feel bad. You'd feel like, damn, like you don't even want to take that money because you're like, damn, that's like, damn, that's, I mean, this person is trustworthy. I'm sure they would have given you the money tomorrow. They needed it for something, but you basically turned the whole world upside down for them to give you this money they have, and you don't even need it, right? And then and these are the point I'm making here is these are the kind of people to collect that money without even feeling the slightest bit of any type of way, not even feeling bad, nothing, and they'll collect that money happily, graciously, and put it in their wallet and walk around with it and go and spend it on something stupid, and spend it without even a second thought about the expense at which the one who gave it to them is suffering. That's the kind of demons, right, that we're talking about here. That's the mindset where it's like you're not even aware of you have no spiritual acumen, no spiritual etiquette. That's the word I'm looking for. So that's why when they were eating the quail, because somebody said, well, they asked for it, the Lord gave it to them, why he didn't destroy them? Because of this. Okay? Because a lot of them, their spirits weren't right. And they were sitting there doing this damn shark bite shit on the quail, pissing the Lord off, or completely pissing him off. So that's why it says, while the meat was yet in their mouth, once again, you go watch this guy like that, just like that. Just like that. He had to be one of those in the wilderness doing this shit. This. Okay, dancing around while the quail was being prepared and doing this. And just like that, boom. That's the spitting image. Just like that, Lord saw that, and he it said the wrath of the Lord came upon him and slew the fattest of them and smote down the chosen men of Israel. Okay, so he brought judgments upon them. Verse 32, for all this they still sinned and believed not for their wondrous works. You know how many times the Lord brought plagues and destroyed Israelites in the wilderness? It wasn't once, I'll tell you that. And you would think, maybe the God that just messed up our enemies, maybe we shouldn't piss him off and make ourselves enemies of him. I mean, one would just think for 1 second, I wonder why. It's not like he just completely destroyed a whole freaking civilization / empire and delivered us. Or maybe that wasn't enough. So how about we remember how he just parted this body of water in half, and we walked on dry ground. And then not only that, but he drowned our enemies. Maybe that's not a God you want to piss off. Or how about the fact that he's already brought judgments upon you in the wilderness once? But no, they still sinned. Okay? Verse 33, therefore their days did he consume in vanity, and their years in trouble. When he slew them, then they sought him, and they returned and inquired early after God. So after the Lord started bringing judgments upon them, in the wilderness, that's when it says here, what? They sought him early. Or they saw him and returned and inquired early after God. But check this out. And they remembered that God was their rock, right? Their God, their power, and the high God, their redeemer. Nevertheless, they did flatter him with their mouth, and they lied unto him with their tongues. So reading this in the NLT, it says, when God began killing them, they finally sought him. They repented and took God seriously. Then they remembered that God was their rock, that God Most High was their redeemer. But all they gave him was lip service. They lied to him with their tongues. You see that? That's why the Lord said, they draw with their mouth, they do honor me, but their heart is far from me. So that's why the Lord is not, he's not showing these crazy signs, and, he's going to bring a major judgment in the time of Jacob's trouble, point blank, boom. Because you know what's going to happen? If he brought significant, but not as significant as Jacob's trouble type judgments, for a period of time, just like the pandemic, just for a period of time, people will stop and act like they're considering, but, they see that, okay, it's not really escalating anymore. It seems like it's dying down. What are they going to go back to do? Everybody has faith. Everybody wants to buy a Bible when things are looking chaotic. And in a second, it looks like it's calming down. What do? Want to right back to wickedness. So all that I've changed and I believe in, what is that? Lip service. Okay. For their heart was not right with him, neither were they steadfast in his covenant. Right. So they didn't remain firmly in his covenant, in the covenant that they agreed to. Moses read it to them and they said, yes, we will do all the words in, oh my Lord, we will do all the words in this book, in this covenant. And in the same time period of being in the wilderness, they did exactly the opposite of what they said they would do. So what? They lied to him with their tongues. But he, being full of compassion, forgave their iniquity and destroyed them not. Sometimes you're dealing with somebody and you just get to the point where it's like, yo, I really want to treat you like you treat me. The kind of BS I gotta endure because of you, the shit that comes out your mouth. If I said those things back to you, we wouldn't be here right now. We wouldn't have any working relationship to build off of. I always have to be the bigger one. I always have to be the one who, I get pissed off just like you, but I got to be the one to bite my tongue and remain calm, because if I'm not the bigger person, it definitely not going to be you. That role you have to play where, you can, yes, you can stoop down to their level. Oh, matter of fact, you can go underground if you want to talk about, going low, right? You can get very petty. You can put the P in petty. All right. But you got to play the role of being the bigger person. And it gets tiring and it's annoying and you get pissed. But you just got to just, just breathe, and calm down and keep the peace, right? Guess what? The Lord did that on our behalf, but on a much larger scale. Look at all the shit. If the Lord was to deal with us, and that's why I think David said that, right? Deal not with me according to my iniquity. Because if the Lord was to deal with the nation of Israel according to our iniquity, according to our sins, there would be no room for compassion, no mercy, none of that. None. Absolutely. There would probably be a heathen nation out there that probably can have a better chance at getting compassion than us. It says, but he, being full of compassion, forgave their iniquity and destroyed them not. But you best believe there were times, man. There were times when he wanted to. Yea, many a time turned he his anger away. So many times, held he his anger back and did not stir up all his wrath. That's to stir up all your wrath. That's like when the example I gave, somebody pisses you off, and instead of thinking about it and really letting that feeling fester to completely anger you and you snap, you don't let yourself get there. So you don't stir up all your wrath. You just, you divert. It's like imagine it this way, right? Imagine their words come into your mind, and then you sort of just like, that Tai Chi, you just let it roll off of you and redirect it out of your mind. Because if you let it stay in your mind, it's going to have the effect of triggering you and you're going to snap. But the Lord didn't snap. For he remembered that they were but flesh, a wind that passeth away and cometh not again. Right? Our life is temporary. Like David said, what is man that thou takest thought of him? Verse 40, how oft did they provoke him in the wilderness and grieve him in the desert? Oft meaning often. Yea, they turned back and tempted God and limited the Holy One of Israel. Oh, Lord. Again and again, they tested God's patience and provoked the Holy One of Israel. You see why the second covenant is needed? See why the laws need to be written? Lord said, I'm not doing this again. No. I'm not doing that. We're not doing a take two, try again, here are the laws, let's start from scratch. No. The laws are in your heart now. That's it. Now you can't go off. Okay? That's it. It's not that, okay, you went and got it's three accidents already. My insurance is through the roof. I'm not going to give you another car and say, let's try again and be more careful. No, you're just not getting any car. You're not driving. If you want to go somewhere, you'll have somebody that drives you there. So you'll get to point A to point B, and I don't have to worry about any more reports and any injuries and damages being done. No. Verse 41 in the NLT, again and again they tested God's patience and provoked the Holy One of Israel. Verse 42, they remembered not his hand, nor the day when he delivered them from the enemy, which are the Egyptians, how that he wrought his signs in Egypt and his wonders in the field of Zoan. That was a plague the Lord brought against Egypt, and and had turned their rivers into blood and their floods that they could not drink. So guess what? When the rivers were turned to blood, they were thirsty. All right, and the Wisdom of Solomon goes into that. They were thirsty, but what were they going to drink? It says he sent diverse sorts of flies among them, which devoured them, and frogs, which destroyed them. Now it doesn't mean that the flies and the frogs, like the frogs weren't biting them and like in the sense of killing them, but it destroyed them, as in it destroyed their habitation. Right, it affected them. It was evil. All right, it went ill with them because of the flies and the frogs. He gave also their increase onto the caterpillar, which is talking about the locusts, and their labor onto the locust. So their increase and their labor is their harvest and their crops, because they work for it. But the locust came and devoured it. So now they were starving. He destroyed their vines with hail and their sycamore trees with frost. Right? These are the plagues that the Lord brought in ancient Egypt. He gave up their cattle also to the hail, because they died. The hail was huge and it was raining down. It was killing them. And their flocks to hot thunderbolts. Okay, here in the NLT it says bolts of lightning. He cast upon them the fierceness of his anger, wrath and indignation and trouble by sending evil angels among them. That's in Wisdom of Solomon 16, 17, 18. Right, the apparitions that the Lord was plaguing the Egyptians with during that night of darkness. He made a way to his anger. He spared not their soul from death, but gave their life over to the pestilence. And that was these plagues that he was spoiling the Egyptians with. And smote all the firstborn in Egypt, the chief of their strength, in the tabernacles of Ham. Okay? And that the tabernacles of Ham is talking about Egypt, or the land of Egypt. Because guess what? Mizraim is a descendant ultimately going back to Ham. So as it says, he smote the firstborn in Egypt, the chief of their strength, in the tabernacles of Ham. And NLT says, he killed the oldest son in each Egyptian family, the flower of youth throughout the land of Egypt, but made his own people to go forth like sheep and guided them in the wilderness like a flock. That's Israel, when he delivered us, and led them on safely so that they feared not. But the sea overwhelmed their enemies. That's the Red Sea, right? That the Egyptians that chased us, they were overwhelmed. They were drowned in it. And he brought them to the border of his sanctuary, which is the promised land, even to this mountain, which his right hand had purchased. Okay? And let's read that in the NLT. It says he brought them to the border of his holy land, to this land of hills he had won for them. He cast out the heathen also before them and divided them an inheritance by line, by measure, or lot, and made the tribes of Israel to dwell in their tents. And that is their dwelling areas or their homes. Yet they tempted and provoked the Most High God and kept not his testimonies, but turned back and dealt unfaithfully like their fathers. Because you had the old generation that was killed in the wilderness. The Lord took them out. And then the new generation came up who were led by Joshua into the promised land. And then as time went on, guess what? They went back and started, because really it was the fathers coming back anyway in the reincarnation, but they went back and started dealing unfaithfully like their fathers. They were turned aside like a deceitful bow. A deceitful bow, as it says, is a crooked bow. You shoot it thinking that it's going to go one way, but because it's crooked, where you aim isn't where the arrow actually lands. For they provoked him to anger with their high places, which is places where they worshipped and set up they set up places of worship in high points to serve other gods, and moved him to jealousy with their graven images, their idols. When God heard this, he was wroth, which is angry, and greatly abhorred Israel. I.e., it says here, he completely rejected Israel, so that he forsook the tabernacle of Shiloh, the tent which he placed among them. All right, and Shiloh, which was where he placed the that at the tabernacle that was built in the wilderness. When you go back during the time of Eli and Samuel, it says and delivered, and that's also going into it's going to go into the ark, right, being taken, that the Lord gave it up to the Philistines, and delivered his strength into captivity and his glory into the enemy's hand. Verse 61, he allowed the ark of his might to be captured. He surrendered his glory into enemy hands. He gave his people over onto the sword, and was wroth with his inheritance, right? But that's basically subjecting us to the enemy, right? That they had the upper hand over us. The fire consuming their young men and their maidens were not given to marriage. Verse 63, their young men were killed by fire. Their young women died before singing their wedding songs. So Israel was basically in a bad case, right? We began plagued, we began judged of the Lord for what? Our disobedience. Their priests fell by the sword, and their widows made no lamentation. All right, it says their priests were slaughtered, and their widows could not mourn their deaths. Then the Lord awaked as one out of sleep, and like a mighty man that shouteth by reason of wine. So as the Lord, because that's what the Lord will do, right? We would be in captivity, we would be suffering, and then the Lord eventually would rise up, on our behalf, having mercy. So it says here, then the Lord rose up as though waking from sleep, like a warrior aroused from a drunken stupor. And he smote his enemies in the hinder parts. He put them to a perpetual reproach. Moreover, he refused the tabernacle of Joseph and chose not the tribe of Ephraim. And that's basically in terms of placing his name over there, because that's in Shiloh is in the land of Ephraim. And that's where the tabernacle was originally. But as it says, chose the tribe of Judah, the Mount Zion, which is Jerusalem, which he loved. And that's where he ended up having the temple built. And he built his sanctuary like high palaces, like the earth, which he hath established forever. Right? So he built it, as it says here, verse 69, there he built his sanctuary as high as the heavens, as solid and enduring as the earth. He chose David also his servant, and took him from the sheepfolds. That was because David was a shepherd, right? He was taking care of his father's sheep. From following the ewes, which are female lambs, sheep, great with young. So both from the great to the young, the old to the young sheep. The Lord took David. I was about to say Jacob, Joseph, because I see the name Jacob here. He took David, from tending to them, and brought him to feed Jacob, which is Israel, his people. And how did he do that? By setting up David as king over them, and Israel his inheritance. So he fed them according to the integrity of his heart, right? And that's basically David ruled over Israel in the integrity of his heart, with a true heart, and guided them by the skillfulness of his hands. And that brings us to the end of the book of Psalms, the 78th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodesh. And until next time, Shalom.